Okay. Welcome everyone to today's artist talk with Jonathan Baldock. My name is Therese Kellner and I'm a curator here at Accelerator. Today we are opening two new exhibitions. It's Adele Size. She's opening one exhibition in one of the spaces called Tyngd Spegel. And that's an exhibition that we have chosen not to translate, but it would be something of mirror of heaviness if you would try to. And that's curated by Richard Julin, who's the artistic director of Accelerator. And we're also opening Jonathan Baldock's Warm Inside, which I had the pleasure to work on. And I think it's worth mentioning that this is actually only the fifth opening that we have here at Accelerator. We've only been open for about 2 years, and so far shown 4 exhibitions. So it's not many. And I'm super excited to have you here, Jonathan, today. It's not, it's been quite difficult lately to travel, and it wasn't for sure even until the very end that you could be here for install, and also today here for the opening and everything. So that's really great. I'm very happy about that. And so today we will talk about Warm Inside, your new exhibition here, and focus on that, but through that dip into some previous work, some recurring themes, and your practice as a whole. And we will talk for about 45 minutes and leave some room for questions at the end. This talk is being recorded, as you might notice, and will be available to listen to in Accelerator channel later on. Channels like on YouTube and on iTunes. All right, let's start with the exhibition Warm Inside and what's presented in one of the spaces downstairs. So we first met in February 2019 in your studio in London. You live and work in London, and I think it's worth mentioning as well, this is your first exhibition in Sweden, so that's very exciting. It was quite soon after that we invited you to do an exhibition for Accelerator. So you have been working on this show for about 2 years now. So when we started to work together and talk about this exhibition, it was different times, or it was before the pandemic, and we talked about things in Accelerator's context that might interest you in your research, such as that we're on royal ground, and we talked about Gustav III and things. But then you went in this direction, and I wonder if you could just start to talk a little bit about what's presented in the show, and what has been the major influence for this work.
Yeah, so I think originally I was going to come and see. We were going to do a site visit, which unfortunately because of COVID I wasn't able to do. But I did have some amazing video calls, which you gave me a tour of the space, and also I was given some photos. And what struck me, because you actually gave me a video call, didn't you, from the entrance of the gallery, and then took me right down. So, entering this subterranean gallery space, it really felt like you're entering another world. So I really thought I wanted to create a world in this space, a sort of it's an own universe, if you will. And I've been wanting to make an exhibition with things dangling from the ceiling for a long time. And unfortunately, you can't do that everywhere because it's, hanging anything from the ceiling, and some spaces just won't take the weight. But with this place, I felt like, that's one of the questions I asked you. I was like, can you hang things from the ceiling? Yeah. And you were like, I'll get back to you. We'll give you some weights. And you told me we could. So I had this idea of creating some cocoons, these life-size cocoons that would dangle from the ceiling, almost like a sort of cave. That was the initial intention, that you're going down into this underground world, and then you'd be hit by these cocoons. And so that was the idea. And then I think I made a prototype of one, a very small one, to show you. And then I started on the 2-year marathon of making these.
It's 12 of them.
There's 12 of them, exactly, 12 of them. But also, I think with the show, it was originally intended to be a bit sooner, wasn't it? So what COVID gave me, which is the positive thing out of it, was that it actually gave me a really beautifully long amount of time to create an exhibition, which is one of the few times I think I've had that amount of time to make work. So I was able to really make an exhibition that just took a lot of hours and a lot of time. And that was a real blessing. Yeah, thank you. Well, not for COVID, but
But over these 2 years, the world has changed, and everyday routines have changed. You, in London, you had a lockdown that we didn't have in the same way here in Stockholm. How do you think that has affected the work?
Well, I think it's like the sort of idea of personal space suddenly became even more important, and it's something that I've been interested in my work for a long time. So the idea of covering things, of containment, of not just physically but psychologically, what is sort of hidden and perhaps not revealed. And I think not really seeing people, like nobody, we didn't see people apart from who you live with. So London was completely deserted at that time. And so all I was doing with me and my partner, we'd literally get up, go to the studio, walk to the studio, and then come back home. And so I think that just the idea of home and the personal space just was really kind of heightened, and the sort of preciousness, I think, of it as well, as both a place of sort of protection and safety, but also maybe as a place where things can sort of come undone as well. And
and that's sort of how you see the cocoons a little bit, right?
Right.
I call them the cocoons now, but
that's what I've been calling them, isn't it? So.
Just because you say it. Yeah. The sculptures, that they both sort of these safe nests a little bit, but could be almost a bit suffocating, right?
Yeah.
As well.
I think it's the idea of what we might hide from each other, or maybe even hide from ourselves, the things inside that you keep safe and protected, but also maybe, I think you can see with the sort of ceramic casts of my body inside them to sort of really heighten the fact that they are cocoons, but the body parts are kind of squashed and
yes,
a bit broken and fractured. Yeah.
Sticking out.
So it's kind of, I think for me, I'm always interested in that play of being, of presenting something that's maybe quite beautiful, that sort of, I wanted it to be seductive on that level, where, the materials, to have a calming aspect of it, which you play with the scent, but that it would also, but maybe that things are not always as they seem as well. So there's a little bit of trouble brewing underneath, maybe, and I guess, clay relates so much or so easily to the human body. It's, there's so many creation stories of, humans being made from earth. And you can really see that, I think, if you work in clay, that it that sort of connection. I think there's almost something really primal about putting your hands in clay. I mean, it's earth, isn't it, essentially? But also how it does, it's so fragile and lumpen and irregular, just like the human body is,
Yeah.
Clay
is something that you, I guess it's your, the material that you come back to over and over again most. Mm-hmm. We will talk a little bit more about your work process and techniques, materials soon. But I want to stay at this idea of, or your thoughts around personal space and also ideas of sleep that you had, of kind of in between worlds and of like hibernation and sleep as a portal to an inner world.
Exactly.
Could you expand on that a bit?
I think so. Obviously, sleep is, or the idea of sleep is an idea that sort of has occurred in some other works that I've made. But I thought about it, in this exhibition. Obviously, there's the sort of the idea of transformation is there in the fact that these are chrysalises or cocoons, and they are spaces or nests. So they're like places where maybe things are born or created or transform. So, and I think and these little portals that you could look at, little portals, little head holes and hand holes. So they're like entering other worlds automatically, anyway, just by the essence of what they are. But I think for me, the sort of idea of sleep, which is further also like played with the lavender, I don't know. I think it's something we spend half of our lives doing, isn't it? So, and again, I think it's something that's like become sort of very valuable as well, during lockdown. Mm-hmm. The bed or the home and sleeping, I don't know if that really answers. I've just kind of repeated what you said, really, but it's
no, you didn't. But I wanted to touch upon something you just mentioned, which is very important, and that you have included a scent in this exhibition, lavender. Why?
Well, I think I'm really interested in the just the use of smell as a scent in an exhibition that maybe we don't often explore, but also a way of creating a sort of a full universe, a full cosmos that's kind of has this smell with it. And lavender is, it was used in the ancient Egyptians used it as in the mummification process. It was used for its antibacterial qualities in the Great Plague. So, and then obviously it's also used as a sort of a sleep, to aid sleep and to calm. So I think like it has a lot of associations, I think, with the body and death and sleep. And it's a smell that I really adore as well. I think like a lot of people. So I thought about it as being this perfect, herb smell that's going to create this sort of very calming atmosphere and world that, that would maybe trigger another way of reading the work as well. Because since smells always just, they're so amazing for just triggering our memories and so it's another way of having a connection with the work.
And like entering this internal world that you just spoke about. Right. And so you just talked a little bit now about this ideas of transformation, and that's something that has really followed or been recurring throughout your practice, this interest in processes of transformation. And I will just jump to an image from your last exhibition that just closed about 2 weeks ago or something in Madrid.
Yeah.
Just to many of your previous works, or you often work with expressions that could be associated with I guess like history of theater, some rituals, ceremonies, and performance. Could you just say something a little bit about this work, but also how this interest has come about?
So this exhibition was another one that was postponed because of COVID, actually, and it was actually supposed to happen a couple of years ago. But I was able to do a site visit for this space, and I went to the Prado and I saw an exhibition of Goya drawings, and there was one exhibition that one drawing that really struck me, and it was a picture of an old man with 2 canes, likely a self-portrait of Goya that he had titled "I'm Still Learning." So it's this. I mean, it could have been. My interpretation was a sort of humility of that you're never too old to learn, and I think I really liked that, and I thought about that sort of on a personal level, I guess, as an artist, that kind of struck me, you know, as a work in progress, but also, and as is the case for this exhibition, which was sort of looking at how our relationship to nature. I took it to sort of how we as humans maybe have still so much to learn about the earth, you know, and that we're still learning. Obviously, materials play such an important part in my work. And so with this exhibition, I recreated a set of sculptures that look to early classification of like the seasons and the senses. So you have like the fan, which represents air. There's a little glass marionette that represents water. And they all come together in this kind of quite theatrical landscape, I guess. And this is a performance that myself and my partner, Rafael Zyko, did. At the opening, we did a series of performances dressed in these costumes with these headpieces which expelled smoke to sort of bring life, I guess, to the objects, the sculptures in the exhibition. And I guess I was just thinking about, you know, our relationship to nature, and imagining a sort of an alternate world, or a world that might have existed in the future or the past, where we've sort of where we have a reconnection with the things, with the world around us. But again, it really, I guess it's sort of the idea of slowing down and using and looking at the material processes also in which I use to make the work. You know, the sort of idea of time I think is constantly referenced somehow, you know, in that, because I think the thing of making things by hand is that I think people can imagine the processes in which they're made, even if they don't know how to do them themselves. It's that the trace of the human body in that work is very clear, you know. And I should say, like, everything that I make, all the textile, the sculptures, they're all made by hand. So that sort of, you know, connection to the body is always really, really clear in the work.
You use embroidery, you hand stitch.
Exactly. So everything, you know, so you see the textiles walking, it's all completely made by hand. There isn't any machine stitch in it. So, you know, that sort of, what am I going to say, the sort of macro way of engaging with an exhibition as well, of it sort of being quite overwhelming, I guess, when you enter the room, like your eye can't take it all in. But then sort of focusing in on different elements, and still being hopefully seduced, like you want to enter the work more. And I think that's well, that's something I hope anyway that people want to do.
And I'm just jumping to the next image here of some recent masks that you have made, and this is an ongoing or something you have returned to throughout years now. And as we saw in these previous images from the performance, you very much focus on costumes and masks, but particularly this ceramic masks. Do you know how many you've done?
I don't know. I haven't counted, but I reckon it might be getting on for it's over 150 to 2. I mean, for me, they are they're just pure joy to make as well. I mean, I think that's quite that sort of is communicated with them, but I make them either quite intuitively, so it's really given the sort of I have the restrictions of the fact that it has the board, that I make it on, so the size, which is a sort of a continuous thing. And then the fact that it has to be a face, and what that face can be, whether it's 2 eyes and essentially a mouth, But
like in the work as well, in Warm Inside, several of the sculptures are very. I mean, it looks like they have a face.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I do it without even realizing. It's like sort of I'm not gonna say I'm obsessed with faces. But I think it is that thing of somehow. I do believe there's a sort of finding yourself through looking at other faces, or I'm trying to think how's it. But I think there's a reason why, like, the mask is, the oldest living artifact, and why it's a sort of a recurring thing in like all cultures universally. That there's something sort of so intrinsically human, or that it speaks to the sort of the core of what it is to be human somehow. This sort of the creation of another face. And the thing that I started to realize about all of these masks, and I feel like I'm going to continue to do them until they start getting repetitive or too similar, but it's that they almost convey different emotions to different people. So some people will say, I felt this one was really sad, and so I like that sort of, like, how the viewer projects a sort of an emotion or an identity on it. But also for me, I can pretty much tell the mood that I was making them in as well, or So some of them can get really dark as well. I mean, if we've got some of the sort of cheerier ones here, but they really sort of go through. Like, I go through waves of there'll be like some of the ones that are more pastely and cozy, cheerful, and then some of them do get a little bit more messed up and dark. And I can't really. For me, they are. I'll stop doing them when they become a struggle to do. I think that's it. But for me, they exercise something in me that's just really, I'm grateful for it. It's like when I don't want to say art as therapy, but it's maybe, no.
But the mask is very much connected to the idea of transformation, obviously. And you have a very long interest in, as I just mentioned, like theater, history of theater, but in particular also like myths and rituals throughout history. Where does this interest come from, would you say?
I don't know. I think for me, well, I mean, I grew up going to church in a sort of Christian, I guess. That's how I was brought up, as a sort of I wasn't brought up sort of to go to pagan rituals and things like. But I think the thing for me as a queer person is that I was always drawn to the idea that there was, as someone that has, my person has sort of been rejected by every major religion. It's that I'm not in that history, So in a way, the sort of, like, when I'm looking at folk histories and rituals and all of these things that I sort of look to, these other worlds, they're places where sort of everybody, that I'm not excluded from. Do you know what I mean? So I think, and there's of course that kind of, it's accessing, yes, I think it's a sort of, it's not just a sort of an imaginary fairy tale, but it's what I'm saying that for me, it's a reality, it's a created reality. Is what I think.
Sure. Something you're currently also addressing is very much our relationship to the body and to how bodies inhabit a space, how we live in our bodies, and the connection to our inner worlds. And in the sculptures downstairs, there's this ceramic parts, as we just spoke a little bit. But the thoughts about the body is very much at the center of your practice. Not only the face, but yeah.
I mean, I think it's, I always say about my work, it's about the body and it's a product of the body. And I think that's also relates to a lot of the sort of, I think using craft, whatever the definition of craft, but, or creating works by the hand, then shall I say, it's a way of making work that I think is, speaks of the body so much, and it's performative, And again, I think, with the creation of like these costumes or these identities, it is this thing of, because the viewer is obviously incredibly important to me in the work, and I'm always thinking about that. It's how you might imagine yourself in the work, even with the cocoons downstairs. It's how I can create a work where you sort of put yourself in that place of the sort of ceramic body, and that's also explored with the costume performance. It's it's like you don't need to be in that costume to imagine what it feels like to be, because I think especially playing with materials like ceramic or clay, they're so familiar to us. We spend 22 hours a day probably, I don't know, more actually, with fabric against our skin. We're picking up ceramic objects, they're so much part of us, they are extensions of us.
And a work that you actually could enter is this. And this work again relates to ideas of personal space and the home. And your work is very much drawing upon your life and personal experiences. Would you talk a bit about this work?
So I made this bed, which is actually a 4-poster bed, and I think at the time I was sharing a room with my boyfriend, and we had a mattress on the floor essentially, and it was we were poor. It wasn't that long ago, but it was and I was just thinking about the sort of the bed as this space as like a world in a way. So we were eating off the bed, we were you'd read, we'd watch TV on there, you sleep. It's a micro mini world, and it's such a personal space as well, So I thought about the recreating a bed in a much grander way. So this is a 4-poster bed that's I appliqued a sort of head with sort of ears and eyes, the sort of orifices, the parts of your body where the surface is broken that you can that sort of where you enter the internal world. So, and basically made this bed and invited the viewer to get inside. And inside, there was an audio work in there, and it was my mum reading from. She'd made a sort of an autobiography may sound really, really grand. It was really sort of there was some sort of memories of her childhood that they were written down to give to me, myself, and my brother. So it was just a personal document that was not meant to be, shared with anybody. But I asked her, and she was sort of wasn't keen on letting me include a little segment, and I also wanted her to read it. So it was my mum's voice reading very quietly on the bed some memories of her childhood. And so when you get in the bed, you almost read this sort of story, but they were stories that I wanted to be quite general and for everybody to have a connection. They're not so personal that, they would mark me out. I think they were stories that we can all imagine maybe our parents tell it. And I think it was actually about her, it was sort of ghost stories that her sister and her was in bed telling each other. But yes, so it was really just about how one narrative affects another narrative. My mum's always been very important to me, and very early on, she was the one that actually helped make some of the shows. Because, like I said, I just decided to do everything by hand. It's kind of tough doing it all by yourself. So I'd be like, Mum, can you help me come up to London for the day and do this? And she would always do it. So it was a kind of a little nod and homage to her as well, in that I wanted to include her in the work.
And I also think it's nice to bring up this work because even if it's very, very different from works downstairs, I think it's very connected. You can definitely see connections of like thoughts around this, like safe spaces and sleep and comfort and relationship to the body very much. What's the title again for this work?
Something's you're gonna crawl inside. That's it. My biggest fear is that someone will crawl inside. Thank you, Raf. That's it. And that actually came from a title of a Robert Rauschenberg work. It was a bed that he put up on the wall, and I think he said, "My biggest fear is that someone will crawl inside." So it was a kind of nod to art history, but then I was like inviting people to crawl inside my bed. It's like you can do it with mine.
And this is the entrance of that exhibition.
That is, yeah. And so that was I did a residency at the Brittiske in Rome, and if anybody's seen it, Palazzo Zuccari, it's amazing. It's got this big, huge face. It was made by an artist, a Mannerist artist, and that's my homage to it. So I did this kind of like ceramic eyes, butcher's shop curtains as teeth, and then a big lolling tongue. But again, it's sort of the public and the private. So you're entering the outside through a big mouth into sort of an internal world, but then you go an extra layer because you're going into the bed as well. So it's sort of worlds within worlds is kind of what I was...
This is actually the only outdoor work.
I know, it's the only one I've been invited to ever do. That was it. Never got invited again.
But what I think is very, what you can tell from this, these images we see now, is the many materials that you work with, and that the importance of the handmade that you just talked a little bit about, and that you work across, you do performances and installations and sculptures, and the materials that you keep on returning to most is perhaps ceramics and textiles. But what's central is that the methods you use and the materials you use have a 1,000-year or many thousands of years long history. What does that mean to the work or to the making?
I think, what does it mean? I think it means that it's something, it should hopefully connect the viewer to the work in a way that sort of it's so familiar and it's so ancient that it all speaks about what it is to be human, because in a way a history of these materials is a history of human civilization. And so I think it's hard not to be aware of that, I think, when you're making the works, if you look at sort of textile textile manufacture was basically the cause of the Industrial Revolution, isn't it? Yeah, I think for me it's I think of these materials though as sort of like prosthetics or antennae to the human body. They're so connected with us, you know.
And something I hear you say now and then is thoughts around what is an essential human experience, and maybe you come closer to that through using materials and methods that have been used for thousands and thousands of years. Downstairs in woman's side, there's the sculptures are woven with baskets or like woven baskets, and then it's wool. Could you take us through a little bit the work process with this exhibition?
Sure.
I'll just jump back to one of the.
I learned how to spin wool, spin yarn just before this exhibition, actually. But I set myself the task to spin yarn for these cocoons because I wanted the sort of lumpen irregularity of them, not quite knowing like how long it would take to spin this sort of quantity of wool. But I think, again, going back to the idea of transformation, it's this thing of getting, you know, a mass of raw wool and then turning it into a thread or a yarn, you know, and then dyeing it as well. So all of the materials and it's really sort of taking base materials and then transforming them and weaving them into these sculptures. So there's a lot of the body is sort of my body, should I say, is part of every part of that work. You know, when I was thinking about like spinning the yarn and you know these fibers passing through my fingers, it's such a weird thing to think that you know these fibers, every part of them have then gone into through my finger and thumb essentially.
They really are like extensions of your body, as you
right. Yeah, totally. And I think so that they are kind of they're I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, I think you can definitely tell. You should all go like close to the sculptures, and you can definitely tell how they have been made. The time-consuming work process, I think, really comes through.
Yeah.
And
I think also, actually, just to remember, so that was another thing about the lavender, wasn't it? Yeah. You know, when we spoke about it, because obviously wool is its number one kind of enemy is the clothes moth. And so it was this nice thing about putting the lavender in them as a sort of a preservative for the materials that have been used in it. But you can see there's also kind of I've used rope, so it's all plant and wool and wool fiber. That's all they are. That's used in the
and
work.
Wool is something you also have worked with previously, like in this exhibition at the Camden Art Center. Even if it's primarily, well, it's a lot of wool because it's on the floor, right?
Yeah.
The whole floor is covered with wool, and then it's these weaved baskets and ceramic parts. Can you say something about this exhibition?
Sure. Yeah. So this exhibition was made at Camden Art Center, 2019, and the floor is a patchwork of woolen, sort of woolen of felt almost. So you enter the room, but you have this sort of softness underneath you. So you're immediately connecting with the work. And then I made this series of ceramic columns. The show came out of a residency that I did at Camden Art Center, which is part of the residency is that you get a show at the end I've been working in ceramic for 10 years before that show, but I never had access every single day to a ceramic studio and a ceramic technician. So it was the first time I got to be really ambitious with ceramic. So each segment is pretty much made to the maximum size of the kiln. And again, this has an audio element to it. So these sort of towers. So when I got given the residency, there's not a sort of prerequisite actually even that you have to use ceramic. But I, as such a maker that I am, of course, doing that is going to affect the show. But I found myself in the British Museum, and I was looking at in the Mesopotamian department, and I stumbled upon these sort of ancient clay tablets with the cuneiform language on them. And I was like, wow, this is like the original history of clay, and it's performative, and it speaks about communication. They're not just vessels, it's clay as... what's also remarkable was that even some of the writing was done with the fingernails. So it wasn't just reeds, but actually just the print of a finger. And it was a pictorial language. It's a completely extinct pictorial language, which only exists because of a big fire. And then the discovery of these tablets. And I just thought about that and sort of mirrored it with today, and the fact that there's a pictorial language now, the emojis, and it's considered the fastest growing language. And then imagined a world maybe even further in the future where sort of emojis are, left imprinted on these sculptures. So they're sort of communicating each other, but they're communicating each other in a very basic way with emotions, and non-verbally as well. So the sound in the work is sort of whistles, laughs. Again, these are sort of universal ways in which humans, beyond language, communicate emotions or feelings. And I guess it is kind of a quite absurd, funny exhibition. You're in this, and you'll get the whistles and the giggles and the laughs and the sobs, and then also these sort of emojis are sort of spewing out of these very bodily. Again, I said like how clay sort of for me really speaks of the body, and there's also the fingers and the hands and the mouths. So.
This when I saw this show, it really made me laugh. Actually,
right? Yeah.
Is humor important for you in your work? Would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I think I'm really drawn to sort of theatricality. Obviously, as you can see, my background's in painting, but I love the sort of creation of like these sort of, all the world's a theatre, to coin a cliche phrase. But, it's, for me, it's that sort of, it's like the sort of comi-tragic theatre mass, isn't it? It's the moving from the happy to the sad very quickly. Sort of tragicomedy kind of trope of playing with an audience like that is, I think, can be quite disarming, but kind of mean that you connect with the work quickly. But I think, I also feel like humor as a thing is massively underrated by society or valued. Do you know what I mean? I think, I always think comics should be like I think just to make you sort of escape your world and to bring you joy like that is such a gift,
But I find that you find this. I mean, it's not only funny, right?
No.
There's always this tension between something darker or something macabre, or like in Warm Inside, this the body parts is sticking out in really awkward way sometimes, and just hanging really strangely, and you always use this kind of tension between. I think it's time to round off even if I would love to talk to you for a bit longer. But first I just want to ask if there's any questions from the audience. Yes?
I wonder about your process, like before you decide an idea and start to actually craft it? Like, how is your process? Do you have like a storage of ideas that you bring up, or do you know straight away what you want to do, like with intuition, or do you like struggle a lot and juggling different ideas until you find it, or is something that develop, or how does the process look until you know that what you're going to do?
I think what I've noticed is it's different with different work. Like it's like anything. Sometimes you have an idea and then it just what is working. You know, that doesn't happen so often. I think more often than not, it's like I have an idea. I think it will be great, but then I start making it and then start realizing that things need to change. Because I think that it's undoubtedly, you know. I'm making the work myself, so I'm not using fabricators. And that's fantastic because it's, you know, it gives me my sort of autonomy to do things myself, but it also means that I'm given all that time to be thinking about it, which can be a bit of a hindrance actually, because, you know, I always think about making, it's not mindless work actually, it's actually really like, it's a really intense thinking space and time. There is something about, especially craft mediums, I think, that really, that allow for a real deep connection to the work. So, but yeah, so inevitably, I think the work ends up having to change, you know? I've learned to be a little bit braver about just editing things out, of being brave to just drop a piece of work, which could be quite hard when you spent a long time doing it. But yeah, I guess does that. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I really appreciated how you talk about the faces and the masks and the body, and how, because with research, there is so much that is about talking how we're really attracted to the face, I mean the body in the room, so that's very natural. Then I was thinking now, when it's been so much digital and with COVID, it's kind of, I'm curious to think how maybe there's a new evolution where we have to adapt to another kind of way of connecting to pieces and art, to each other, and how, if you have any thoughts on that, you know, how, you know, to adapt to this kind of more digital or abstract way, but when you're so physical and hands-on.
Yeah, I don't know whether I have any all I know from personal experience is that I think I really missed going and seeing physical work over the, you know, 2 years of you know, lockdown. And it was, and I really missed going to see physical objects, sculptures. That's what I missed the most, because I think it's the hardest to communicate actually through the digital. Performance, for instance, I think is impossible, really. I did watch a lot of online performances, and you know, I don't think it, for me, it just lost a lot of that energy that you have when something is, which I love as well, because, you know, it's obviously really important to me because it's what I do in my work. I don't know how I think it might change it. I know for me, it's made me value it a lot more. Value being in a room with other people as well. It's really crazy. You know, I went to a bar here on last Saturday, and it was full, and it was really lovely. Like, you know, 2 years ago, I would have been like, oh, it's too busy, I need to get out. But it just became that sort of connection with other. I think I sort of started a lockdown thinking I was much more introverted than I actually am. You know, it's actually people and physical experiences are really important, aren't they? Yeah, I don't know. So I don't really know whether I. Yeah.
I think that's. We'll take one last question, but yeah.
No, mine is more an observation, like connected to what she said, because the first thing I saw when I saw a picture of these cocoons was a balaclava, you know, which is a mask also. So it's like, I don't know, with this COVID situation, and it's also something that can be handcrafted and connected to the textile, and I don't know, I could see there is like a connection between all the things that you presented and also the use of color. I think it's amazing. So mine, it was more like, I don't know, a compliment or like adding like.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here and listening and celebrating the opening of the 2 exhibitions. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing some insight to your work. And I think it's time to go down and see the exhibitions, right? Thank you.
Thanks.